Jonathan's return was unplanned. The board meeting of his thriving tech empire had ended far sooner than expected, freeing him of corporate responsibilities just as the golden Californian sun began its descent. He pulled into his sprawling estate, the white stone gleaming, surrounded by the kind of manicured lawns that signaled his success to the world. His only intention was to surprise his family with an early weekend together. As he entered the grand foyer, the rhythmic clacking of Vivian's designer heels echoed through the quiet, like a metronome of domestic order. But then, a sudden percussive thud shattered the peace. Something small had struck the wall. For a split second, Jonathan froze, keys to his Bentley still dangling loosely from his hand. This wasn't the sound of laughter or routine. It was something altogether different, something violent. He stepped into the living room, and the world tilted. There, against the backdrop of priceless artwork and custom furniture, little Lana was crumpled in the corner, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, clutching the remnants of a broken vase. The blood seeping from her knee was a dark stain against her brown skin, and would soon become a stain on Jonathan's conscience. Towering over Lana was Vivian, the woman Jonathan had believed he knew, ice-cold fury etched into every line of her flawless face. "How many times must I tell you?" Vivian snarled. "Keep your filthy hands off my things." The venom in her tone was unmistakable, her manicured finger stabbing the air just inches from the terrified child's face. "Do you even know what that vase cost? More than your mother will ever make in a year cleaning here." Jonathan's heart lurched. For a moment, he stood paralyzed, every muscle tensed in shock. He had known Lana since her earliest days. Carmen, Lana's mother and Jonathan's loyal housekeeper of almost a decade, had raised the girl to be unfailingly polite, sharp as a tack, and endlessly curious. Lana was no ordinary child. Her presence had always filled the mansion with a playful lightness, a sense of innocent joy that even the grandeur of wealth could not create. Yet here she was, eyes swollen with tears, clutching porcelain shards as Vivian's rage loomed over her. The dynamic between the women in Jonathan's home had changed the very air, transforming the mansion from a sanctuary into a stage for cruelty he never thought possible. Subscribe and hit like. Our powerful stories add years to your life. Join our Story Lovers Club and let us know in the comments, where are you listening from? It all happened in a heartbeat, but for Jonathan, time seemed to stretch into eternity. He took in the blood on Lana's leg, the wild fear in her eyes. The chilling transformation of Vivian, a woman once praised for her social graces, into something far more menacing. Lana's voice trembled as she pleaded. "Please, Mrs. Vivian. I was only trying to help clean. The vase slipped when I heard the TV." "Liar! You always make excuses!" Vivian snapped, raising her hand as though to strike. It was in that instant, with the threat of violence hanging in the air, that Jonathan felt something shatter within himself. The anger was there, of course, but underneath thrummed a clarity that burned away all doubt. He was no longer a spectator. Now he was a father figure to a frightened child, and a silent judge to the woman he called his wife. For 3 years, Vivian's charm had been unassailable. To Jonathan and their circle, she was the very image of grace, articulate, tasteful, benevolent in charity and conversation. But the mask had slipped. Alone with a vulnerable girl, she showed no trace of kindness. The sharpness of her features, once so alluring at galas and dinners, was now twisted into a cold, unrelenting sneer. "Vivian," Jonathan said, his voice cutting through the cruelty like the crack of a whip. Vivian whirled around. Instantly, her rigid posture melted into a performance. Surprise and innocence arranged masterfully on her face. "Jonathan, darling, I didn't hear you come in," she simpered, but it was too late for theatrics. The girl broke the Ming vase, the one her mother gifted us for our wedding. Such a pity. But Jonathan no longer saw his wife's curated elegance. He saw Lana, shrinking away, the cut on her knee already drying to a crusted scar. The way her small frame seemed trained to recoil from even the hint of conflict. Every detail screeched at him. This was not a unique mishap. This was a recurring trauma. As Vivian played her part for his benefit, Jonathan's mind flashed through memories, snatches of stern glances, comments about proper upbringing for staff's children, fleeting looks of fear on Carmen's face. The gravity of his ignorance weighed on him. How had he overlooked this side of the woman he shared his life with? Courage gripped Jonathan as he knelt, making himself small and non-threatening for Lana's sake. "Are you hurt, sweetheart?" he asked softly, completely ignoring Vivian. Lana's eyes darted from Vivian to Jonathan, her lips parted, but her voice barely there. "Mom's at the market. She went to get kitchen supplies." The words held all the fragile hope of a child trying desperately not to upset the balance. He kept his distance, trying to earn her trust. "How often does Mrs. Vivian speak to you like this, when I'm not home?" The silence that followed was more damning than any testimony. Lana's face tightened, her gaze falling to the floor. Vivian shifted defensively, clearing her throat. "Jonathan, you're overreacting," she scoffed. "Children need rules." It was an accident, nothing more. But Jonathan saw it in Lana's posture. The stiffness of someone accustomed to danger. The caution in every gesture. At just 8, she carried the invisible armor of someone used to navigating minefields. The room was thick with the residue of past injustices. He pressed gently. Has she been harsh before?" Lana's answer was in her eyes. A storm of fear, longing, and relief at being asked. For Jonathan, the dam had burst. He suddenly understood the depths of his miscalculation. While he had been building empires, cruelty had flourished unchecked in his home. Vivian's eyes narrowed as she realized her husband wasn't buying her story. For the briefest moment, the venom she had reserved for Lana flickered toward Jonathan. It was gone in a blink, replaced by the polished mask, but the truth had already seeped through. Something new and terrible opened up inside Jonathan as he watched Vivian's performance. He thought back to Carmen's strange smiles, Lana's unusually quiet presence, and the growing sense that he had missed critical evidence. The pattern, hidden in plain sight, suddenly became clear. In those 3 years, his trust had not just been misplaced, it had been weaponized. Vivian's sweet voice filled the room. "Jonathan, darling, I just want order in our home." Someone has to teach her responsibility, or she'll grow up like so many others, undisciplined, entitled. Jonathan noticed, for the first time, the way she spat out their children. The contempt was palpable, and Jonathan marveled bitterly at the blindness of privilege. How could he have missed this? He crouched down again to Lana's level. "Tell me exactly what happened, Lana. No one is angry, I promise." Lana wiped a tear, trembling. "I was helping clean the living room, like I always do. Then something loud came from the TV, and I got scared. When I moved, my arm hit the vase." Vivian interrupted sharply, her voice slicing. "I saw her playing with it, pretending it was a microphone. These kids have no sense of value." But Jonathan didn't look away from Lana. His next question drew him in. What happened on the TV? Lana chewed her lip. It was a lady yelling at a girl, saying mean things. Mean, like how Mrs. Vivian talks to me when Mom isn't here. That sentence, as soft as a whisper, stunned Jonathan. He saw it now. A hidden curriculum of fear, shame, and division, running parallel to the grandeur of his household. The next moments shed all illusions. Vivian's protest grew desperate. "Are you seriously going to believe the fantasies of a child, Jonathan? She's just trying to deflect from her behavior." Jonathan ignored her. "Lana, has this happened before? You can tell me." The girl's courage was fragile, but at last she nodded. "Mrs. Vivian said if I told anyone, Mom would lose her job, and we wouldn't have money for food. She says people like us should be grateful to be here and not cause trouble." Pain twisted in Jonathan's chest. "People like—" Lana's fingers brushed her own dark skin. "People are color." The air was heavy with unspoken history. Vivian's face, drained of its practiced nicety, sharpened into something cold and combative. For the first time in their marriage, Jonathan saw her not as an equal partner, but as a stranger capable of cruelty. The realization stung. He had been living beside an imposter. Vivian, defensive, tried to justify herself. "Jonathan, I was just teaching her boundaries. Carmen is a wonderful employee, and I appreciate her. But sometimes she needs firmer supervision with her daughter." "You understand." At that very moment, the front door opened and Carmen returned, her arms laden with groceries and her face immediately tightening as she sensed the tension. She took one look at her child's knee, the broken vase, then at Vivian's cold poise, and Jonathan recognized the same haunted fear in Carmen's eyes that he'd just seen in her daughter's. He realized with sinking horror how long this had been going on below the surface of his flawless home. She set her grocery bags down slowly, hands shaking just enough for Jonathan to notice. Instinctively, Lana clung to her mother, hiding her wounded knee, but unable to hide her tears. Carmen's eyes darted from her daughter's face to the jagged remains of the vase, and finally to Jonathan and Vivian. A mother's intuition needed no explanation. She understood immediately, reading the emotional temperature of the room as only a survivor could. Jonathan met her gaze, feeling an unfamiliar sense of guilt spread inside him like ice water. How many times had he trusted Vivian's reassurances that Lana was adapting well? How often had Carmen hidden her worry behind a tired smile, trying to preserve the only stability she could offer her child? The mosaic of privilege and secrecy, long ignored in favor of comfort, was shattering with every heartbeat. Vivian seemed determined to reassert control. Her composure returned, crystalline and cold. "Your daughter has been careless, Carmen. This kind of irresponsibility cannot be tolerated in a home like ours. We cannot have accidents like this." The words were as much a threat as a statement, echoing the hierarchy built on the silent labor of women like Carmen and the vulnerability of children like Lana. Carmen nodded once, swallowing back anger and humiliation. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Vivian. It won't happen again." Each word was chosen with care, the survival instincts of an immigrant woman ingrained. She could not afford to challenge the balance of power directly. Lana's small fingers twisted in her mother's skirt, seeking safety, even as she stood accused. But this time, Jonathan found that silence was an act of violence he could no longer commit. He stood beside Carmen and Lana, not between them and Vivian, but shoulder to shoulder, signaling a shift in loyalty. "Carmen, please take Lana to the kitchen and tend to her knee. She can rest there as long as she needs. No more chores today." The tone in his voice brooked no argument. Carmen paused, her gratitude wordless but profound. Taking Lana in her arms, she gave Jonathan a trembling, hopeful look before disappearing down the hall. Turning to Vivian, Jonathan's face was set with a new resolve, a decision to see things as they truly were, no matter how ugly the sight. Left alone with his wife, Jonathan felt the magnitude of the moment press upon him. This was no minor squabble, no domestic spat that could be smoothed over with hollow apologies or fleeting acts of contrition. The cruelty exposed was the kind that festered, that rewrote the DNA of a home until it stung with quiet misery. Vivian, sensing the gravity, tried to regain composure. "Jonathan, you're blowing this out of proportion. We give those people more than fair wages, and—" He cut her off, voice suddenly raw. "Those people? Vivian, she's a child, and this isn't the first time, is it?" Her eyes flicked away, guilt smudging her perfectly applied makeup, but her pride wouldn't let her admit defeat. "You've always been too soft. That's why they take advantage. You take in staff and their children. You hand out bonuses. Do you ever wonder why they never leave?" Jonathan felt anger threatening to overwhelm his reason. He had always considered himself a good man, generous, just, and blind to difference. It was a fantasy, he realized, constructed with the help of partners like Vivian, who fed him comforting lies. The story of his marriage was as compromised as the story of his supposed benevolence. Vivian, Have you ever once asked what Carmen's life is like outside these walls? Jonathan's voice was trembling now, but stronger for it. Do you understand what it's like to be afraid that every misstep will cost you your home, your child's safety, your livelihood? Vivian's mouth twisted in disdain. We're their employers, Jonathan. Not their saviors. That one sentence told him everything he needed to know. The illusion was gone. News of the confrontation did not take long to ripple through the household. Maria, the cook, appeared at the kitchen doorway when she saw Carmen's red eyes and Lana's bandaged knee. Even the gardener, Anthony, paused his pruning when Lana's quiet sobs drifted out the open windows. For years, the staff had learned to move in the shadows, their presence felt, but never acknowledged by the home's owners, except for Jonathan, who had always given them extra in the envelope at Christmas, and the odd smile when no one was looking. In the kitchen, Carmen sat Lana down and dressed her wound with gentle, practiced hands. She murmured words in Spanish, soothing her child's fears, erasing the lines left by Vivian's scorn. Lana's breathing slowed. But the damage was done. Carmen glanced toward the living room, unsure if waiting for Jonathan's promise of safety was hope or foolishness. Back in the living room, Jonathan paced. The afternoon light, once a golden promise, now seemed harsh and interrogative. Every surface gleamed with accusation. How long had Lana been crying in corners? How many times had Carmen swallowed humiliation to save her daughter? How often had Jonathan let Vivian's version of events lull him into apathy? His phone buzzed. The board wanted an answer about next week's merger. He let the screen darken. His business could wait. This, his home, his family, and the reckoning of privilege could not. Vivian remained unmoved. "You're going soft, Jonathan," she hissed. "You always do. One incident, and you're ready to rewrite everything. You worry so much about appearances, but what about loyalty? What about the order that keeps this house running?" He looked her straight in the eyes. What about kindness? What about decency? What about making sure no child is afraid to live in our home? Vivian stared him down. But for the first time, Jonathan saw the emptiness behind her eyes. There was a chasm there, a place where empathy had never taken root. Shortly after, Carmen re-entered the living room, carrying herself with fragile dignity. She offered to pay for the broken vase, but Jonathan stopped her. "That's not why we need to talk," he said gently. He gestured for her to sit, unwilling to return to old hierarchies. Vivian scoffed, but said nothing. "Carmen, how long has Vivian been?" He trailed off, unwilling to put words to what had just happened. Carmen sat quietly, eyes downcast. Her accent was thicker, her voice steadier than expected. "Sir, I'm grateful for your kindness all these years, but this is not the first time. My daughter, she's just a child. Accidents happen. I teach her to be respectful, to say thank you, to never take what is not hers. But sometimes nothing is enough." Her hands twisted in her lap, the pain of years condensed in that one gesture. She looked up, watching his reaction closely. Mrs. Vivian has always been different when you were away. Strict, yes, but also unkind. I accepted because, for me, job is all. For Lana, I wanted quiet, safety, a break from the city. Please, Mr. Jonathan, do not punish her for one mistake. I will pay for Vase. Jonathan's heart broke. Carmen, you should never have to make these kinds of choices. Not here, not anywhere. Vivian's jaw clenched. Don't you see? This is what they do. Make you feel sorry for them. Manipulate, exaggerate. Jonathan shook his head, at last certain. Just stop, Vivian. Carmen let out a long, slow breath, as if she had been holding it for years. Lana clung to her, silently bearing witness. Decades of silence had finally fractured. Night drew its velvet curtain over the mansion as the crisis reached its breaking point. Maria fed Lana ice cream in the kitchen, trying to sweeten the taste of a bitter day. Jonathan stayed in the living room, staring at Vivian, his partner in a life that now felt like a lie. For a long, unblinking minute, he spoke first. Vivian, I need you to leave. Tonight. She laughed bitterly. You can't be serious. All this for a child and her mother? Is that what your empire's built on now? He held her gaze, voice even. It's built on respect, on decency. I won't let you poison this home any longer. Pack what you need, and my assistant will contact you about the rest. Lana and Carmen will stay as long as they want, and they will be treated as family. Vivian's indignant fury was relentless. You'll regret this, Jonathan. You're letting soft sentiment win over your head. You'll see how grateful they are when they bleed you dry. Jonathan listened, but her words no longer landed. The spell was broken. He watched as she stormed upstairs. Each with as much warmth as he had ever felt, he said simply, You're safe here, and I promise I'll never look away again. In their relief, in the bright courage of a little girl's smile, he found the fragile hope of redemption and the chance to build a future truly worthy of the home he had always wanted. As the dark settled outside, the mansion's mood transformed. Gone was the icy tension of earlier hours. In its place was an uneasy quiet, fractured by the lingering echoes of confrontation. Lana sat at the kitchen table, her bowl of ice cream slowly melting, but the fearful tremble in her hands was beginning to fade. Maria, sensing the gravity around her, carried herself with careful warmth, humming softly as she cleaned, making the vast kitchen feel less lonely. Carmen watched her daughter, her own heart caught between relief and disbelief. For years, she had walked on eggshells, teaching Lana the codes of silence, the importance of blending in, the art of apology, even when no real mistake had been made. She had accepted that safety was always conditional, that generosity always came with invisible strings. To see Jonathan now, resolute, protective, drew forth a cautious hope. But freedom was still a foreign feeling. That night, Jonathan made dinner for everyone. He diced vegetables clumsily, stumbling through a recipe he remembered from his childhood. It was the most ordinary meal the house had seen in years. But for Lana and Carmen, the simple act was extraordinary. They ate in companionable silence, the aroma of fresh herbs mingling with the sharper scent of new beginnings. After dinner, Jonathan sat with Lana and Carmen in the softly lit living room. There was no talk of broken vases or accusations. Instead, he asked Lana about her favorite books, listened to Carmen share stories of her own childhood in Mexico, and invited Maria and Anthony to join. For the first time, laughter returned. Quiet at first, but building as the night wore on, growing bold enough to challenge the ghosts embedded in the house's marble bones. In those hours, Jonathan did something he hadn't managed in years. He saw his home not as a monument to success, but as a living space meant for connection. Each person was more than their role, more than their labor or lineage. They were people with histories, dreams, and wounds that deserved to be honored. After everyone had gone to bed, Jonathan found himself alone in his office, surrounded by the trophies of his life, photos of galas, awards from his company, glossy magazine covers bearing his smile. For years, he had measured worth in stock options, philanthropic donations, and the praise of the social elite. Now every image felt hollow. He scrolled through his phone, thinking about the times Vivian had charmed their guests with talk of charity and good works, or subtly reminded him of their responsibility to those less fortunate. All the high-minded philanthropy was window dressing, masking the rot that had spread right beneath their expensive roof. Jonathan's thoughts churned back through every red flag he'd missed. Lana's withdrawn gaze, Carmen's stifled voice, Maria's hurried disappearance when Vivian entered the kitchen. Each memory was a nail in the coffin of his blissful ignorance. He realized that privilege had made him blind, insulating him from the realities faced by the very people who kept his life running smoothly. Carmen had navigated a maze of unspoken rules, raising a daughter in the crossfire of someone else's carelessness. Lana had grown to interpret silence as a survival mechanism, learning to hide joy and pain with equal skill. With trembling hands, Jonathan began to write letters of apology to each of his staff, an email to his brother asking for advice about family counseling, a message to Carmen pledging a new kind of relationship. He typed into the night, determined that his next chapter would not be written in silence or shame, but with painstaking honesty. In the quiet, Jonathan finally accepted a painful truth. Caring was never enough. Only action, consistent, visible, and humble, could begin to heal what years of complacency had shattered. The next morning dawned bright with promise, sunlight spilling like gold across the mansion's long corridors. For the first time in years, Lana woke up without fear cramping her belly. Carmen held her close, whispering reassurances that sounded more real now, less like prayers, more like plans. Jonathan greeted everyone in the kitchen, trading his suit for jeans and a soft pullover. He made a point of addressing each person by name, asking after their families, listening with genuine attention. When Anthony mentioned his son's troubles at school, Jonathan offered help, not as a benefactor, but as a friend. When Maria described her daughter's wedding, he asked for pictures, smiling at stories he had never bothered to hear before. He called a meeting with all his staff, sitting together at the large dining table, the sun making patterns on the polished wood. "I owe all of you an apology," Jonathan began, voice thick with emotion. "I've let things happen here that should never have been tolerated. From now on, we start fresh, with better pay, more respect, and new policies so no one, especially children, ever feels threatened." Carmen's eyes glistened. For the first time, she felt Maria nodded quietly. Anthony squeezed his wife's hand, and Lana gave Jonathan a shy, grateful smile. It wouldn't undo the past. The mansion still carried the scars of a shattered innocence. But the day brimmed with hope, a kind that rebuilt, layer by layer, what cruelty had tried so long to tear down. Throughout the week, Jonathan worked tirelessly to redefine the heart of his home. He invited Carmen and Lana to join him on outings, a trip to the park, lunch at their favorite Mexican restaurant, afternoons spent reading together. It was awkward at first. Trust, once betrayed, preferred distance. Lana watched him with careful eyes, uncertain whether kindness would last. It was during an afternoon at the city's botanical gardens, surrounded by the soft buzz of hummingbirds and the sweet scent of blooming flowers, that Lana finally spoke without hesitation. She told Jonathan about her dreams, of becoming a scientist, of traveling the world, of helping children who were afraid, like she once was. Her bravery cracked open something inside him, a paternal tenderness unburdened by entitlement. Carmen, too, began to blossom in the new climate. She took over as head of household management, her skills and wisdom steering the mansion away from silent hierarchies. Maria and Anthony were promoted, given real autonomy. At every staff meeting, Jonathan insisted everyone have a voice, no matter their status or salary. He introduced diversity and inclusion workshops, opening up uncomfortable conversations about race, class, power. It wasn't easy. Old habits resisted. Maria worried about making trouble. Carmen hesitated to complain, but Jonathan persisted, offering support without pity, enforcing boundaries with gentleness and conviction. Little by little, laughter grew more frequent. Lana's knee healed, her spirit mending, along with Jonathan's shame. They watched movies together, played chess, gardened as a family. A new normal, built on the ashes of what had once seemed unchangeable. Over time, the house became a gathering place, not just for its residents, but for friends and neighbors. Carmen invited her sister and nephews for Sunday dinner. Maria taught a cooking class in the renovated kitchen. Anthony hosted barbecues in the yard, bringing laughter and stories from people who once felt invisible. Jonathan's friends noticed the shift in him. Some were skeptical, fearing scandal or gossip. But Jonathan stood firm, defending his choices and challenging his peers to see the value in connection over convenience. He started a foundation supporting immigrant families, inspired by Carmen's resilience and Lana's courage. Vivian, meanwhile, faded from their lives, a storm replaced by sunshine. News of her departure sparked curiosity, but Jonathan declined to gossip. He focused instead on building a legacy grounded in love and respect, welcoming differences, listening deeply to pain, and celebrating every victory, no matter how small. Lana thrived at school, winning awards for her essays and experiments. Carmen's confidence grew, influencing even the wider community as she became a leader among local women. The mansion was no longer a fortress. Now it was a beacon, shining brightly with the promise that, given space and care, any wound could begin to heal. As the seasons turned, the mansion's rhythms began to hum with new energy. The calendar brimmed with dates, not black tie events, but family movie nights, pizza parties, and impromptu concerts in the living room, where laughter echoed from gilded ceilings. Joy was no longer a performance, but something spontaneous and shared, bursting forth in stories, music, and games that made everyone feel welcome. On the anniversary of Lana and Carmen's arrival in the house, Jonathan threw a party, walls decked with vibrant streamers and piñatas, the menu brimming with homemade dishes inspired by Carmen's childhood memories and Maria's family recipes. Friends, staff, and neighbors mingled without boundaries, distinctions of status or background melting away in the warmth of genuine camaraderie. That evening, as Lana led a chorus of children singing, their voices high and hopeful, Jonathan stood back and realized the transformation. This house, once a monument to wealth and order, was now a canvas of laughter and inclusion. The shift had been gradual, and at times fraught with awkwardness and hard conversations. But each moment was a brushstroke in a portrait of healing. Lana beamed, surrounded by friends who saw her light, not her difference. Carmen, tears in her eyes, hugged Jonathan, finally able to believe that home could mean more than just shelter. It could mean belonging. Maria and Anthony danced in the garden, their families cutting across shadows once cast by fear. Every tradition made together became a story told anew, laying down roots for a legacy of empathy and unity. In the months that followed, Jonathan's personal and professional lives became deeply intertwined. Inspired by Carmen, Lana, and the rest of his chosen family, he shifted the mission of his company. Internal programs celebrated diversity and equity. Scholarships were created for staff families, and company events prioritized accessibility and genuine inclusion. He became a mentor, to young entrepreneurs from marginalized communities, seeing in their hunger and hope echoes of Lana's aspirations. Each story of triumph and struggle sharpened his sense of responsibility. Jonathan gave lectures around the city, often inviting Carmen to share her journey. Her wisdom held the room in respectful silence, her voice steady and clear as she spoke of perseverance and dignity. At home, the atmosphere bloomed. With Vivian's departure, negativity lost its grip and kindness flourished. Small acts added up. Tutoring Lana, late-night talks with Maria about her dreams for her children, working with Anthony to create a garden where everyone contributed. Meals were rituals of connection. The dinner table swelled with jokes, debates, and confessions that once cowered in the dark. Every accomplishment, no matter how minor, was celebrated. The community learned to measure success not by perfection, but by the willingness to start again each day with greater honesty and compassion. Jonathan rediscovered parts of himself he had buried under ambition and legacy, finally understanding that true leadership meant lifting others, not just standing above them. As word of Jonathan's transformation spread beyond the boundaries of his home, the ripple effect became impossible to ignore. Local organizations asked for his input on family-friendly workplace practices. Parents in the neighborhood, once hesitant to send their children to play at the mansion, now saw it as a safe haven, a place where every child, regardless of origin, was protected and respected. Carmen's story became a beacon for others in similar circumstances. Local news outlets covered her advocacy for immigrant mothers. Workshops she ran alongside Jonathan helped families learn to recognize and stand up against workplace injustice. Lana, her confidence now infectious, led a volunteer group at her school, her empathy inspiring classmates from all walks of life. Anthony's son got the tutoring he needed, thanks to Jonathan's quiet intervention. And Maria's cooking class became so popular that the town center hosted it monthly. Staff turnover dropped to 0. The mansion, once a symbol of exclusion, became the heart of a growing network where diversity was celebrated, not merely tolerated. Not every day was perfect. Moments of pain and misunderstanding still crept in, old scars sometimes reopening without warning. But the difference was palpable. The family and community knew, now, how to face these moments together, with open hearts and honest words. The house on the hill was no longer a fortress. It had become a foundation for hope. Years passed, but the lessons Jonathan learned remained sharp-edged and vital. Whenever a new staff member arrived, Carmen and Maria welcomed them like kin, teaching them not only their tasks, but the value of their own voices. Lana grew into a remarkable young woman, graduating early and earning a scholarship to a university where she planned to study law. Her ambition fueled not just by personal drive, but by a fierce desire to safeguard children the world might overlook. Vivian drifted further into the past, her memory losing power as time shaded her actions with the perspective of loss and consequence. Jonathan saw clearly now the weight of silence and the cost of indifference. He kept a broken shard of the infamous vase on his office shelf, not as a relic of shame, but as a reminder that every day presented the choice to witness, intervene, and stand up. Gatherings at the mansion swelled with faces unfamiliar and stories brand new. But the old pain was honored, not hidden. On special days, Jonathan would offer a toast to family, found and chosen, to broken things, to wounds that taught us how to heal. Tears sometimes accompanied the laughter, but so did a profound gratitude for every scar that proved survival. In time, the house became a story in itself, a living narrative told in sunlit kitchens and leafy gardens, laughter ringing from every room. It was no longer defined by the darkness that once haunted its halls, but by the lights set against it, acts of protection, courage, and boundless love. Jonathan's legacy was no longer an empire, but a community, a tapestry of people who had learned through heartbreak and healing that dignity and justice begin at home. Carmen and Maria, pillars of strength, inspired generations of women and girls to stand tall, to claim their space unapologetically. Lana, astonishingly wise beyond her years, mentored children who once flinched at a raised voice, teaching them to trust in possibility again. Every anniversary of that pivotal day, the house filled with music and remembrance. Old wounds were spoken aloud, not to reopen them, but to seal them with understanding and resolve. The story was passed on, how a child's broken silence and a father's fierce love had changed not only one family, but an entire community. In the end, what remained was not perfection, but perseverance. A reminder that even in the most privileged or hardened of places, change is always possible. All it takes is the courage to see, to break the silence, and to love bravely, without reservation or condition. And so the mansion stood, not as an edifice to wealth, but as a sanctuary of hard-won grace. Where secrets had once thrived, truth now flourished. Where fear had ruled, hope was now law. And the story, Lana's story, Carmen's story, Jonathan's story, echoed on, a pledge to all who entered. Here you are seen. Here you belong. Here you are safe.